Okay, so what we have is our clay slab that you have at home or in class. And I have a smaller slab just because for demo purposes, but you guys are going to be getting a larger slab. And you need to go and find things that you want to imprint in. So I have little keys. You can do seashells. You can do little texture things. Some people have vases at home or other objects that would look really good with the relief impression into it. And then before you do the impressions, what I'm going to have you do is you're going to take about a quarter of it, and you're going to cut that off, or just after you do the impressions, leave about a quarter of it because that's going to be like your bottom. All right, so now what we're going to do here is we're going to take this and we're going to make our impressions inside of the whole thing. First that I'm going to do though is I have this really cool like cobblestone-y thing. I'm going to make this impression over the entire thing to make a really cool texture. You also can draw on this. You can write, you know, anything you want to do with maybe with the toothpick that I sent home. But otherwise, the texture and the imprints are really what are important. This is a very subtle texture, but that's why I'm going to put the keys over top of it. So okay. And it's hard to see on the document camera, but you can kind of see the texture there. And then I'm going to take and I'm going to press the keys in. And carefully, if you don't have fingernails or a way to get it out, you can take the little toothpick, pop whatever it is out. Whether it's a keychain or a shoestring, whatever you have at home that could look really cool, seashells, objects, characters, make it a different kind. You're not going to see them super well to start with, but after the clay is fired in the kiln, then it's going to end up showing quite obviously once we paint it or glaze it, depending on what you're doing. So right now, this clay is called wet clay. The clay is wet. It's very malleable. You can do a lot with it, but sometimes that's actually a detriment because you want it to stay and it's like sagging down. So that at that point, you need to let it get leather hard. And that's after a while of being in the air, usually about a day of working on it, when it becomes leather hard. And then that's the point at which you're going to be carving into it or shaving off the edges or anything else if you were doing this a little more complicated than what we're doing now. So say if you're taking a ceramics class next year with Mr. York. Okay, so I think that's pretty good. I'm going to put one last one down here. And then I'm going to go grab a thing of water really quickly. So if you're not at this step, like I said, after this, I'm going to put it all together. I'll do it step by step, but right now I'm going to just get it done so you can see how it's going to be in the future. Okay, so grab a little cup of water. You don't need very much, just a tiny little bit to dab on. Okay. All right, so I have my little cup of water, and I have these, you know, tools that are very cheap, easy, no big deal. For the bottom, I would say you need it to be pretty flat. If you had a little extra there where it was like really curvy, you can cut that off. You can leave the top, because you can cut that in the end if you don't like it. So over here, we need to make the bottom of our vase. This is going to be the side walls. So we're going to actually create a circle. You don't want a huge circle because this might not go all the way around, but you have a cup or something at home, or you can just freehand it because it doesn't need to be perfect. So I'm taking my toothpick, When it's wet clay, it cuts very easy, kind of like butter. And you can just create a circle. Nothing too crazy. Okay, so I'm almost done. What I'm going to do is a technique for adhering the pieces together. Now we're going to be scratching and scoring. So when we scratch and score, it actually looks like hatching and cross hatching. You're going to scratch and score one side and scratch and score the other so that both sides are roughed up, and then you're going to smush them together with some water. Usually that would be slip, but for this easy one, it's water. And it's going to lock it together. If I had this piece of clay and this piece of clay, and I smush them together, and then they dry, they're just going to fall apart. So I have to get the scratching and scoring so they lock, and they're not going to fall apart when they dry. That's the entire point of this. So all around the top where this is going to sit, I'm going to take my toothpick, or you can take your the ridges in your knife and create that texture, that scratching and scoring, that hatching, cross-hatching. I like using this toothpick, but don't do it very deep. Just lightly scoring it. Okay, so that I'm getting a texture all the way around the edge and the top. And then on the bottom of my piece here, just until it starts to curve up. And I'm going to take a little dab of water, not very much. It's already very wet. You can probably feel it in your hands. It's absorbing the moisture in your hands. So make sure we're going to wash your hands afterwards well and put some lotion on if you have it. So now I'm going to take it and I'm going to drape it. This is hard to see over the top, but you can see I'm lining it up. I'm going to drape it so that it goes around. And what it's going to do is we're going to overlap. And you can choose whether your overlap is on the outside or your overlap's on the inside. I feel like it's easier on the outside, but if you do it on the inside, no worries. You just are going to be careful to add more water to the outside if it cracks and smooth it down. Okay, so while it's like this, sitting upright, you take and you're going to scratch and score where it's going to overlap over here, and scratch and score where it's overlapping on the outside or inside. Add a little bit of water and take it and place it together. Okay, and once it's pushed together, you're going to have to, be careful and forcefully push it, but without, firmly, but not crazy. And that's why I gave you the spoon. You can push down inside with the spoon. And then what you need to do is carefully smush it so that you're pressing the clay. See how I'm pushing the clay in there? So it kind of smooshes over to the side. You can't get all the way down in, but you can get most of it. You can a little bit more with the knife too. And then we got to do the bottom because right now it's just sticking there. And if you scratch and scored it well, it'll stick well. But see, I've got a little hole and I've got this chunky bottom. Now I got to fix that. And then I'll finish my top off. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to take my spoon, or if you have the knife, whichever you prefer, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to press it upward and smooth it. And press it upward, go around and press it upward to basically smush this together, and then afterwards I can smooth it down with some water in my fingers. If you have a little hole, take some clay, push it up in, smooth it, get rid of that hole. Okay, so in about 1 minute, I'll be done with this tutorial, and then I'm going to do it step by step by step for anyone who needs. But if you are missing class, you can go and you can watch this video and pause it and start it and pause and start it. So let me smooth this down. If you had key imprints or other imprints down here or words, you'll have to go back and fix that. But ultimately, just take some water, smooth it around, make sure there's no gaps or holes. You can use your fork, or not a fork, your spoon if you don't like the way it feels. Okay. And any other areas that are like cracking, just take some water and smooth it down. And then last but not least, my top. If you like the way that looks, that's fine, but I'm not a fan. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut so it goes down at an angle. And then I'm going to smooth it all and be done. Try not to put pieces together. This is something that we don't usually have to worry about with this, but if you have a piece and you're going to take it and smoosh it on, say you want to add a little heart or something over here, you need to scratch and score this piece on the back, scratch and score here, put a water and press it down in. If you don't, you could create an air bubble. And if you haven't worked with clay very much in the past, maybe in middle school or elementary, you might not know, but if you trap a bubble inside of your clay and you fire it, and the kiln fires this, once it's dry, at 2,000 degrees. So your ovens at home are only about, 500-600 degrees max, and you never really cook food there. I only cook pizza at 450. Most things are 350. So if you think about that, 2,000 degrees, and then think about this, for 9 hours, some fire longer. So these are a long time, and what happens is that little air bubble that's trapped inside your clay gets hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter, and when air gets hotter, it expands, and then there goes your piece. It'll explode it. So definitely try not to get any air bubbles. Push the clay firmly together, and when you're done, you got to let it set somewhere very carefully to dry. And then once it's all dry, be very, very careful, because that will be called bone dry, and it's ready to go in the kiln. It's going to turn very white and very light colored, unless you have a terracotta clay, which will look reddish, very light. And then once it's done, it's ready to be painted or used and glazed.